The window wasn't open yesterday. That one sentence, spoken softly by a 12-year-old girl, would unravel an entire plan that could have erased a community's legacy. But it didn't start with drama or danger. It began, as many stories do, on an ordinary afternoon in an ordinary neighborhood. Emily Harper was just a quiet, observant girl who liked to finish her homework in a place that felt like home. The Liberty Wheels Clubhouse wasn't your typical biker hangout. Sure, there were motorcycles parked out front and leather jackets hung near the door, but step inside and you'd find shelves of donated books, a worn pool table, and the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the side room. To most folks in town, it was a second home. To Emily, it was a sanctuary. Her parents worked long hours, and she lived with her grandmother in a small apartment above the pharmacy. Most days after school, she'd walk the few blocks over to the clubhouse with her backpack full of textbooks and her mind set on math. That Tuesday afternoon felt no different. The early spring breeze had a chill to it, and Emily walked with her jacket zipped up and her hair tucked behind her ears. When she reached the wide front steps of the clubhouse, she hesitated just a second. Something felt off, like a faint echo in the air. Then, without warning, a figure rushed past her from the doorway. The man moved fast, head down, baseball cap pulled low. He brushed against her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble back. No apology, no eye contact, just quick steps fading down the sidewalk. Emily steadied herself, hand braced against the wood railing. Her heart was beating faster than usual. The man had come out of the clubhouse, that was certain. She shook it off, thinking maybe it was someone in a hurry. Still, the feeling sat in her chest like a stone. She stepped inside. The front door creaked in the same familiar way it always did. The warm scent of old books and motor oil welcomed her in like it always had. No one was in the main hall. A few mugs sat near the coffee station, and the sunlight spilled in long beams across the wooden floor. Everything looked normal, almost.
Emily headed toward the reading room in the back, the one with the green armchair by the window where she always sat. She dropped her backpack, pulled out her math workbook, and settled into the chair, pencil in hand. For a few quiet minutes, the only sound was her writing. Numbers, equations, fractions. Everything else faded away, until she felt it. A breeze, gentle, steady, cool across her face. She looked up. The air conditioning wasn't on. There were no fans, and yet the room had a drift of air that shouldn't be there. She turned toward the office door just beyond the bookshelf. That's when she saw it. The window. It was open. Not wide, just slightly. A few inches, enough to let in air and something more unsettling, a feeling of being watched. Emily stood and walked toward it. Her fingers touched the old wooden frame. She remembered what Mike, the clubhouse leader, had told her once. "We never open this one. Lock's too tricky and it sticks. Better just leave it shut." But now it wasn't shut. It wasn't even locked. And as she looked closer, she saw faint marks, scratches on the edge of the frame, like someone had pried it open with something metal. Her breath caught. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't someone forgetting to close up. She backed away slowly, eyes scanning the room. A chair slightly out of place, a small desk light still on. Then something else caught her eye. Near the computer desk, under the corner of the monitor, a crumpled napkin, brown ink, slightly damp at the edge. She picked it up and smoothed it with her palm. The words printed in neat cursive, "Briarwood Cafe, where neighbors gather." Emily blinked. That cafe was 3 blocks away. The bikers never brought food from there. They had their own coffee pot, their own mugs. That napkin didn't belong here. Someone had brought it. Someone in a rush. She turned as footsteps echoed behind her. It was Mike, along with Carol and David, 3 of the regulars who kept the place running. "Everything okay?" Mike asked, concern etched in his voice. Emily held up the napkin. This was next to the computer, and the window's open. It was locked last time I was here.
David's eyes narrowed. He crossed the room and leaned down to inspect the computer tower. Then he paused. His hand moved behind the screen. "There's a USB drive plugged in," he said quietly. For a moment, no one spoke. Then David's fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of code flashed on the screen. His face changed, his jaw clenched, eyes scanning faster and faster. "It's a data wipe," he said, voice tense. "Whoever put this in was trying to delete everything. Financial records, tax forms, membership files, all of it." Mike stepped forward. "Can we stop it?" "I already did," David said, yanking the USB free. "But this wasn't an accident. This was a hit job." Emily looked at the napkin in her hand, the open window, the man in the cap. She swallowed hard. "I think I know who it was." Emily didn't sleep much that night. She kept replaying the moment over and over. The man in the cap who brushed past her at the door, the napkin from Briarwood Cafe, the open window, and the virus-loaded USB drive. Her instincts had told her something wasn't right, and now she knew for certain that someone had tried to erase everything the Liberty Wheels Club had built. The next morning, Emily returned to the clubhouse. Mike and David were already there, and Carol had brought in a box of old receipts to help rebuild any files that might have been lost. But their eyes turned toward Emily as she stepped inside. She didn't wait for them to ask. "I think I saw the guy who did it," she said, voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. She described him in detail. Young, maybe 20, slim build, hunched shoulders, moving fast, cap pulled down low, and something about the way he had avoided her gaze. It wasn't just someone in a hurry, it was someone afraid of being seen. Mike looked at Carol, then back at Emily. "Briarwood Cafe," he said quietly. That napkin didn't just blow in through the window.
It didn't take long to agree on a plan. Briarwood Cafe was only a short walk from the clubhouse. They decided to go quietly. No accusations, just observation. Emily walked with them, her eyes scanning the streets as if retracing every step from the day before. The cafe sat on the corner, its wide windows letting in the late morning light. Inside, the usual buzz of conversations mixed with the hum of the espresso machine. They stepped in. A little bell above the door rang cheerfully, almost too cheerfully given the weight of what they were looking for. Mike ordered coffee for everyone, and they chose a table near the back. Emily kept her gaze on the counter where the staff worked. One barista was an older woman with silver-streaked hair and warm eyes. Another was a college-age girl with bright red nails and earbuds in her ears. But then someone stepped out from the kitchen carrying a tray of clean mugs, and Emily froze. "That's him," she whispered. Her hand gently tugged Carol's sleeve. "The one from the door." He looked younger up close. Nervous energy radiated from him. He didn't make eye contact with customers, just kept his head down and moved quickly from task to task. Mike made a phone call, quiet, brief. He didn't mention names, just said, "We found him. We'll need a calm approach. Don't let him leave." Within 20 minutes, 2 plainclothes members from the neighborhood watch arrived, along with Mr. Walker, the local council representative. The move was clean. No scene, no raised voices. Mr. Walker approached the cafe manager and explained that they needed to speak with one of the employees. The young man, his name tag read Ryan, looked up and immediately sensed something was wrong. His hands trembled slightly as he set down the tray. Mike stepped toward him calmly. "Ryan, right?" he asked. The young man nodded, eyes darting toward the back exit, but one of the neighborhood watch members was already there. "Could we speak with you in private?" Mr. Walker added, his tone firm but not threatening. They moved to a small back room of the cafe, away from customers and staff. Ryan sat on a plastic chair, cap still on, legs bouncing. The silence was thick.
"We know someone accessed our computer system yesterday," Mike began. "We have evidence. We're not here to hurt you, but we need to understand why." Ryan's shoulders sagged. He buried his face in his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. "I didn't want to do it," he said. "I swear I didn't. I didn't know what else to do." Bit by bit, the story came out. Ryan lived in a small apartment with his grandfather and two younger brothers, ages 9 and 7. Their parents had died in a car accident when Ryan was still a teenager. Since then, he'd been trying to hold everything together. His grandfather's pension barely covered rent and medications. Ryan worked part-time at the cafe, scraping together just enough to keep the lights on and the boys fed. "We were 3 months behind on rent," he said. "I thought we were going to get kicked out." He'd been venting one day, just talking to a coworker about how hard things were, how he didn't know what he was going to do. He hadn't noticed the man at the corner booth listening in. That man introduced himself later as Derek Miller, saying he worked for a company called Everbright Developments. He seemed friendly, polished, like someone used to getting what he wanted. Derek said he understood Ryan's struggle and offered a way out. Just a simple task, nothing harmful, he promised. All Ryan had to do was go into the Liberty Wheels Clubhouse and plug in a USB drive. It would pull data, just numbers, no damage, just verification for some legal stuff, he said. "And in return?" Carol asked. "He promised me a job," Ryan said, his voice cracking. $40,000 a year, health insurance, a fresh start for me and my family." He paused. "He even showed me a contract." But it had all been a lie. David, who had joined them quietly, stepped forward. "That drive wasn't for collecting data. It was a deletion tool. If we hadn't caught it, everything would have been lost. Years of tax files, donations, legal proof of ownership." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know. I didn't know. Please. I thought I was saving my family." Carol leaned forward, her voice gentler now. "They used you, Ryan. They picked someone desperate, someone they thought no one would believe."
Emily, quiet until now, finally spoke. "But I saw you, and I believe you." After Ryan told the truth, no one in the room raised their voice. No one slammed a fist or called him names. Instead, there was a long, thoughtful silence. Mr. Walker nodded quietly and said, "Thank you for being honest. We'll take it from here." Back at the Liberty Wheels Clubhouse, the atmosphere had shifted. The virus had been caught in time, but it left everyone with a bitter taste. They knew now what they were facing. This wasn't just about one desperate young man or a random act of vandalism. It was a coordinated attack led by Everbright Developments, a company with deep pockets and an even deeper hunger for control. Their goal was clear: to erase the club's records, fabricate financial misconduct, and push the city to seize the property. Once that happened, the historic building would be bulldozed and replaced with sleek condominiums. But the club wasn't going down without a fight. Mike called a meeting that night. He reached out to every member he could. Some arrived in oil-stained overalls after long workdays. Others came straight from dinner tables with their kids. The old wooden hall, with its creaky floor and dusty ceiling fans, filled with quiet determination. "We're not just defending a building," Mike said. "We're protecting our story, our people, and every hour we've poured into making this place something that matters." The first step was recovery. David and Rachel, a retired IT expert, led the digital team. They began restoring files from cloud backups, external hard drives, and even archived email accounts. They double-checked every spreadsheet, every donation record, and every tax document going back more than 10 years. Nothing was too small. Nothing was overlooked.
Meanwhile, Carol and Daniel, the paralegal, dug through filing cabinets and bankers' boxes full of receipts and handwritten ledgers. They cross-referenced vendor payments, community grant letters, and city permits. Susan, a former bookkeeper in her 60s, showed up unannounced with folders of old financial summaries she had kept just in case. It was exhausting work, but no one complained. They worked in shifts, made sandwiches in the kitchen, brewed pot after pot of coffee. Someone brought their dog, someone else brought sleeping bags for the kids. The clubhouse, for a few days, turned into a war room, organized chaos powered by grit and loyalty.
Emily, who had set everything in motion, remained in her usual corner. She quietly finished her homework, but never stopped watching, never stopped listening. She wasn't treated like a child anymore. She was one of them. 3 days later, word came through the local bulletin. Everbright had formally requested a public hearing with the neighborhood zoning board. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at the community center. Their official reason: to raise concerns about financial transparency and property zoning regarding the clubhouse on Maple Street. No one was surprised, but everyone understood this was it. The real fight had begun. On the night of the meeting, the community center overflowed with people. Some had lived in the neighborhood for decades. Others were newcomers drawn to the area's charm. The Liberty Wheels members arrived together, a quiet show of unity. They wore jeans, vests, collared shirts, no theatrics, just purpose. Everbright's team, by contrast, showed up in crisp suits and polished shoes. They wheeled in a projector, passed out glossy brochures, and nodded confidently as they set up. Derek Miller stood at the front of the room, smiling like a man used to winning. He opened the presentation with architectural renderings, glass towers, landscaped courtyards, promises of economic revitalization. Then, without missing a beat, his tone changed. "However," he said, pausing for effect, "we've come across some disturbing inconsistencies regarding the financial management of a certain property, namely the clubhouse on Maple Street." He clicked to a slide labeled Irregularities. That's when Mike stood up. "Before any conclusions are drawn," he said, "we'd like to present our own documentation." There was a slight hesitation. The zoning board chair, a man in his 50s with reading glasses perched on his nose, looked unsure. "I suppose that's fair," he said. What happened next shifted the entire room. Carol stepped forward first, placing 3 binders on the table, each color-coded and tabbed with index labels. She opened to the first page: bank records, donation logs, receipts from vendors, every line accounted for. Daniel followed with scanned permits from City Hall, approvals for block parties, charity rides, food drives, tax documents stamped and signed, historical records that proved the clubhouse had been serving the community for more than 35 years. David connected his laptop to the projector and pulled up a timeline of the digital attack. The screen showed a clear map of the USB breach, its timing, and its function. Not just access, destruction. He included logs showing how quickly the virus was caught, thanks to Emily's observation. Finally, Mike stood again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice steady, "this wasn't about data or safety or transparency. This was about erasure. Erasing a place that has served this community for generations, replacing it with a nameplate no one remembers, and using a scared young man to do it." He paused, letting that settle. "We've reported the attack to the proper authorities. We're cooperating fully. And we have reason to believe this was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of behavior from Everbright." There was silence. Then someone clapped. A second later, the whole room joined in. The vote from the zoning board came an hour later. It was unanimous.
The Liberty Wheels Clubhouse would retain full legal status and would begin the process to receive official designation as a historic landmark, making it nearly impossible for developers to force any further action against it. Derek Miller and his team gathered their belongings quietly. No handshakes, no smiles, just the sound of expensive shoes clicking toward the exit. Emily stood beside Carol, watching them go. No words were spoken, none were needed. They had won. Not with noise, but with truth. Not with threats, but with proof. Not with money, but with unity. And the fight, at least for now, was over. In the days after the hearing, the clubhouse didn't just go back to normal, it moved forward. The zoning board had ruled in their favor. The building was safe. But the question remained, what would happen to Ryan? He had told the truth, cooperated fully, shared everything he knew. And in the eyes of the district attorney, that mattered. Instead of jail time, Ryan was offered a second chance through a restorative justice program. He would complete community service, learn financial literacy, and give back to the very place he had nearly harmed. No criminal record, no lifelong label, just a real opportunity to make things right.
Mike didn't leave it there. One afternoon, he visited Ryan's apartment. Ryan answered with worry on his face, thinking maybe this was about restitution. "It's not that," Mike said gently. "I have a question. Do you like working at that cafe?" Ryan shrugged. "It's a job, but not really." Mike smiled. "We've got an empty cafe space at the clubhouse. Needs someone to run it, with training, with support. I think that someone might be you." Ryan was stunned. "You trust me?" "You earned it," replied Mike. "You told the truth when it mattered." And so Ryan began again, not just working a job, but learning how to run a business. Carol taught him how to budget. David showed him how to track inventory. Over time, he built something more than a cafe. He built a space where people gathered, connected, shared. 6 months later, the cafe buzzed with life. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air. A bulletin board near the door held flyers from local families. Ryan even hired 2 local teens, giving them the kind of opportunity he once wished for. And Emily? She still came after school. One day, as Ryan handed her a hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, he simply said, "Thank you." She looked up, puzzled. For what? For noticing, for speaking up. She smiled. "You're the one who chose to change." Outside, motorcycles lined the street. Inside, laughter, warmth, and the hum of second chances. And just beside the clubhouse door, a bronze plaque now gleamed. Historic landmark. Not because of bricks or history books, but because of what people chose to do when it mattered most.